In this video we're looking at how to spot and how to translate a final clause. Final clauses are very easy to see in a sentence. You can tell because you have this word ut. And as soon as I see an ut in a sentence, I can draw brackets from the ut to the verb at the end. Now the verb is a subjunctive, and we'll come back to talk about that in a minute. Once I've divided my sentence, I have two small sentences that I can deal with by themselves. So ad oppidum is a preposition phrase, militares festinavarunt, regem is an object, and then defenderent is a verb. So what does this sentence mean? The soldiers hurried to the town. Now the ut, I'm just going to translate as to. The soldiers hurried to the town to defend the king. And that's what a final clause looks like. The soldiers hurried to the town to defend the king. And that explains why it's also called a purpose clause. It explains the purpose of what they were doing. If we look at the second sentence, let's do the same thing. As soon as I see the ut, let's draw a bracket in there, and we'll go to the verb at the end of the clause. That means I'm left with my main verb, pugnabamus. I've got an object, and I've got a verb, liberaremus. So, we were fighting to libero, to free patriam, our country. We were fighting to free the country. You'll see in both these sentences I've been able to translate ut as to. And in most of the final clauses using ut, you'll find that you can do that. Let's look at what happens with a negative final clause. With a negative final clause, instead of having ut, I have ne. But the rules are going to be just the same. I could put my brackets in, I can surround the clause, and that leaves me two short sentences. So I have puri, I've got a verb, and I've got a preposition phrase. The boys ran from the school. Now, the second part of the sentence is a little bit harder. For a start, I've noticed I've got a passive verb, which is why I've got a magistro, by the teacher. So the easiest way of translating this is going to be the boys ran from the school so as not to be spotted by the teacher. There are other ways of translating this as well though. I could have so that they would not be spotted by the teacher, or I could have, if I'm very old-fashioned, lest they be spotted. I would suggest the first two of those are better. The boys ran from the school so as not to be spotted by the teacher, or so that they would not be spotted by the teacher. Look at my second example. Well, let's put my brackets in. Ne to the subjunctive at the end. Let's see, I've got a preposition phrase at the beginning, so I'm going to start with a verb. They hurried to the school. Now the difference here is that I have a separate subject. I've got magister. So here I need to make sure that when I translate my sentence, I have my subject doing what it should be doing. So they hurried to the school so that the teacher would not be angry. And you can see how ne in this sentence is going to be so that, not. I could also say lest the teacher be angry, with that old-fashioned way of saying it. So negative final clauses are a little bit more complicated than the positive ones, and you have to get used to this idea of so that, not, to make it work better. Finally, let's look at what the verb is. Now in all of these clauses, the verb is an imperfect subjunctive. It's a subjunctive because it's not suggesting whether the thing actually happened or not, so it's subjunctive rather than indicative. And I can tell it's an imperfect subjunctive because each of these verbs is made up of an infinitive with the ending stuck onto it. Even the irregular verb esse, from sum esse fui. So as soon as you see an infinitive with a verb ending attached to it, you know straight away that is the imperfect subjunctive. And it's by far the most common subjunctive in Latin. So, how do I form a final clause in Latin? I'm going to be looking for ut or ne, and then a subjunctive verb